All right. Hello. Welcome everybody to another presentation of the Online ColdFusion Meetup. I'm Charlie Arehart, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. And in this edition, our 300th episode being recorded on Thursday, October 27th, 2022 at noon Eastern Time. We're just going to celebrate the group and have a look back at some things and talk about some new directions for the group. Don't worry, nothing too crazy. Not moving to PHP or anything like that, but just going to talk about how some things, some challenges that I had and that how I want to address those going forward. So first, thanks to those who are chiming in the chat. Thank you very much for that. And then to everybody who'll be watching the recording later, this is as much for you as for them. So again, thanks everybody. Come in, sit back and relax. And I'd really hope to have like some noises and celebratory popping of, stuff like that, but I just didn't have time to get that together. That's one of the challenges. All this stuff involves a lot of work. So again, let's enjoy what we got here. And by the way, since I see some people chatting in there, can I just get a thumbs up from anybody that confirms, yep, you hear me? Because I don't want to go ahead proceeding down this whole presentation and find out nobody's hearing me the whole time. When I'm here by myself, it's a little harder because I can't know that stuff when I'm listening to the presenter. I can know it. And so far, nobody said anything. So now I'm wondering, can you guys hear me? I'm going to ask in the chat, can you guys hear me? Anybody say yes? Please don't everybody say yes. If you see one person say yes, then okay, cool. Thank you. That's it. Nobody else needs to say anything. All right. Well, let's move on. So sorry for that little hassle. All right. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, you might be surprised by some things. We'll talk briefly about the history. Some of you know it. Some of you don't. You might be surprised by some of it. We're going to talk about you guys. We're going to celebrate our members and some things about the members. And some of it may surprise you. And then we're going to talk about our meetings that we've had. And again, some stuff may surprise you. Then we'll talk about our speakers that we've had. It'll be fun looking back at some of the names. Also, in looking back at the meetings, we'll look back over the topics that we've had. And again, some of it might be surprising. And the speakers will be fun. You might see some old names from long ago who moved on from ColdFusion, and you'll see other people who are still active in the group as well. And then we'll talk about the topics that we've had. I guess I realize now maybe I meant to put those in a slightly different order, but after the meetings, we'll probably talk about the topics and then talk about the speakers. And then we'll talk about some challenges we've had along the way, and then we'll talk about a new direction that I intend. So, all right, let's go ahead and move on. So just quickly about the group, if you didn't know, it was formed originally in 2005 by Stephen Arehart. And Stephen at the time, I don't know if at the time he worked for Adobe or he soon started working for Adobe, but he ran it for those first couple of years and he had to step down in 2007. And so he was looking for folks to step up and take it on. And Ray Cannon and I both volunteered and he let us take it together. And we did. And for the first few months, we did that. And then Ray decided he had to step down. And so some months later, he stepped down. And so ever since then, 15 years now, I've been hosting it and happy to do it. Glad to help. As it's my signature, happy to help, just trying to help. But I want to clarify that the things I'm going to show now are really since I took over because I have those details. I don't really have the details, some of the details from when Stephen ran it. So, still we're celebrating as much the 15 years and the 300 episodes since then. That's really what this is about. But again, thank you to Stephen for starting it at the beginning and running it for those first couple of years. So now let's talk about you guys, not our members. So you'll probably see on the meetup.com site that we currently have, it says listed 3,000 plus members, 3,248. And some of you might question that. And I'll just say that, yes, meetup.com, has some characteristics about it that can make somebody wonder, is that a really accurate number? But I will just say, there's a lot of other groups that don't have that many. So these are mostly legitimate. The other thing too, is that if people don't stay active in some way, like if they don't, if their emails get rejected, because Meetup sends invitation meetings whenever I post a meeting, and Meetup would remove people. So this is really 3,000 people with active accounts, with active email addresses. And that's, pretty compelling. But somebody might go, there's not really 3,000 members of the group. Well, I'll say this, at least 2,000 of them have RSVP'd at least once. Now, a couple of things about that I just want to clarify. You don't have to RSVP, you can just show up. And you don't have to be a member of the group, as some of you may know. In fact, some of you listening right now may not be members of the group, and you may just hear about the meetings and come to the meetings. And that's cool. You don't have to be a member. I post the URL for the meeting everywhere, in the Meetup event page. You don't have to be a member to see it. So, it's cool. There's probably more people than those 2,000, who have participated in attending and stuff like that. But anyway, let's move on. I just went ahead and did a little more digging, and I confirmed at least that 600 people have attended any meeting in the past 4 years. So we might say that maybe currently there's actively 600 members, and the rest just get the stuff and maybe they don't come, but they like to keep up on what's going on in the community, whatever. I just thought that was some interesting statistics. Here's another one that might interest some of you. Here's a count of signups by year. And you can see going back to 2005, it quickly progressed into the 2009 timeframe. And for some weird reason, 2009 was a high water mark for a lot of stuff, not just CF, but certainly in CF. And some people have even maybe argued that that was the heyday, because you can see it started to go down, but it did continue. And then it's gone down quite a bit in those few years. And then recently it's ticked back up. And I want to thank right now Dan Wilson, who a couple years ago was helping me to promote the group and help find speakers. And then more recently, Gavin Picken has been actively involved in helping in some aspects of finding people or promoting the group on their Modernize or Die. And we'll talk about that later. Great podcast. Love that. And yeah, so 2020, like I said, that could be when Dan was particularly helpful in spreading the word. And then we'll see in a moment how there was also a similar kind of pattern to the meetings that we had. So the meetings went down in that same period where things went down, and then the meetings have gone up since then. So it could be a combination of that and having more meetings again. We'll see that in a moment. But yeah, what is interesting to look at that is to see there is that kind of pattern, and it's not like it's just tending downward all the time. And then as far as 2022, somebody might say, well, yeah, that's tending downward. Well, let me say a couple things about that, because I don't want somebody to look at this and go, this is some sort of reflection of ColdFusion. I would just say a couple things. One, the 2022, we haven't had that many meetings this year. We'll see that in a moment. And so that could reflect it. When we have meetings and we announce them, some people learn about the group for the first time and they'll sign up. And then remember too, you don't have to sign up. I'll say one more thing is that since we started doing it on YouTube like we are now, people could just be following the YouTube channel and just get notifications that way. And they don't need to join the group on meetup.com. And it's free. If you didn't know, you can join free on meetup.com. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that it's interesting to see. So anyway, let's go ahead and move on. I also thought, just for interesting statistical analysis, what about counting the year that people last attended? Because again, somebody might go, well, that's going to certainly be worse recently. No, it's not worse recently. Again, there was that high water mark in the middle around 2010, 2011, 2012, which was the high water mark of when some people haven't, and by the way, when I say attended, this is meetup.com tracking whether they attended the meeting. And attending a meeting to meetup.com means you RSVP'd. Yes. Because there's no other real way to track that you attended. There's no like physical attendance, but I'll just say, so, basically, I think that's the way we would interpret it. But still, it kind of follows the same pattern. I just thought it was interesting to see. And again, it's tracking upwards towards the end. So there's just, a lot of people recent, as I just told you, like 600 people that are actively attending in the past few years. And that jives with that graph there. So I just thought that was interesting. And now let's celebrate you guys. So I went ahead and looked and I said, well, who had, according to meetup.com, who had RSVP'd most often and attended in the past 3 years? Because, looking back at 15 years, some people are long gone and they're not here to even see this. But of those, I thought, who have attended in the past 3 years? And all of these have RSVP'd and attended somewhere between 70 and 100 of the meetings. So yay, you. And the names are the names that are offered in Meetup. So there's Big Tall Jeff. Not sure who that is. There's Dave Irovic. Sorry if I don't know how to pronounce that. Ed Bartram, Jacob Fiefhaus, I believe that's be the way to pronounce it. And then Kal Vangapali. So again, thanks to you guys for attending and you're participating. And I know there's other people here that are at meetings often. And again, the YouTube is different. And I'll talk in a moment about some YouTube stats that I do have, but it doesn't quite give me this sort of breakdown by person. So I just thought that was interesting. Meetup gave me that information, so I thought I would pass it on to you guys. And thanks again for you all. All right, so about the meetings. So here's where I was talking about the number of meetings. So this is the number of meetings per year. And if you look, the heyday was 2009, 2010, 2011, and it started petering off 2012. And look at that dearth from 2013 to 2019, really. There was like a 6-year period where it was kind of a desert. And I don't believe that's at all any reflection of ColdFusion, although some people do feel that CF itself had a high watermark of activity and people doing stuff and writing stuff in that early part of the 2010s. And I'll just throw out there that something else to think about is that that's also about the same time frame in which social media started taking off, other resources were made available. So I think that some of the reason why there weren't as many meetings was that the presenters didn't feel as compelled to do it, and the audience didn't feel as compelled to say, hey, where are the speakers? Because they were finding their resources elsewhere. In the early days, it might have been harder, and the meetup was a good central place. And then some of you know that there have always been real user groups, and this group was formed, in the early days like those other user groups. And technically, this is the largest ColdFusion user group, but it's a technicality. It's online, so of course it's going to be largest. But I just wonder, there could be some relationship with that. But anyway, the interesting thing was there was that dearth there in that few years, and I and then Dan and then Gavin have all been trying to revive it. And you can see I started in 2019. And it's funny, if you look at this next screen, you'll see something interesting. So the years with the most meetings, just interesting technical trivia, is 2010 had 52 meetings, and 2009 had 50 meetings. The year we had the least was 2015, and it was only one. And at least that was me. I stepped up and said, look, I'll do at least one. And I want to say again that when there's no meetings, it's hard to say what's the cause for that. Partly, if I was busy, I wasn't maybe looking around to find people as actively, or nobody was approaching me. That's for sure. Because anytime anybody wanted to talk, I'd get them on. So I said, oh, you got to have something. So I stepped in and did that one talk. And I've always been reluctant to do more. I didn't want it to become the Charlie show, and we'll talk about that later. But I just thought that was interesting. There was that 1 year with only one talk, and the longest stretch between any meetings was actually December 2017 to October 2019. We went 22 months. So technically, I guess, no, I should have said that 2018 was a year we didn't have any meetings, because I believe that's true. I don't know if we can tell that by looking at the graph. Right. That was a statistical mistake in my analysis. You see 2018 is missing on the graph. So there was no meeting in 2018. I didn't even step up, and that's, unfortunate. But anyway, I didn't get a whole lot of feedback from people saying, hey, where's the meetings? I'd get occasionally 1 or 2 in a year, but really there's not a lot of demand where people are saying, give me stuff. And I don't hold that against anybody, and I don't regard that as any sort of bad reflection. I just think some people, are busy, and they'll take what they're given, but they're not actively looking for it, and they're not going to necessarily notice that something that they would take advantage of isn't there. So it's just an interesting sociological thing. And then Jim points out we saw the same decline in local user groups. Their last meeting was in 2018-ish. And yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at with my point earlier, is that just in the broader technical world, especially social media taking off, and Slack and some other things, LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups, I think there's a lot more avenues for people to find help, and therefore their need for a user group diminished. And then of course we've got COVID in 2019 or 2020, but you see that didn't affect us. We went, that's a good thing, right? Some in some ways people are home and able to attend meetings, so whatever. There's a lot of factors that influence all these things. I just think it's interesting to think about, but it's not, I don't see any of it as any kind of strong indicator of the health or anything about CF, because trust me, there are so many topics we could discuss that we haven't even ever discussed. And again, we'll talk about that later when we talk about new direction. So I'll just ask you guys, here we're talking about the dearth. I'm going to tell you, there were times we had 2 talks in one day. in one day, not just 1 week, 1 day. So we tended to, we've always said our meetings are Thursdays at either noon or 6 p.m. Eastern. Right. And David mentioned too many options. Exactly. That's why some people just, you go to whatever makes sense for you. So anyway, back to this. I'll just throw out, anybody want to guess how many times in our 300 episodes, how many times did we have 2 sessions in one day, one at noon and one at 6 p.m. on the same day? Anybody want to throw out a guess? Even if just a couple of you throw out a guess, it's just fun. Nobody's writing. Anybody listening? Don't think too hard on it. Just all right. Well, I'm not going to wait forever. So how many times have we had 2 talks in one day? Believe it or not, almost 60 times. So almost 60 times, mostly in that first 5 years, we were having so many presenters. It was just such a different time. It really was. It was great, of course, right? Also made me very busy because running these meetings is tough. There you go. All of a sudden, suddenly I see 5 and 6. I don't know. Maybe there's a lag in, there could be a lag in YouTube. In fact, yeah, it's possible that by the time you guys somehow heard me ask that, I'd already moved on. So anyway, yeah, not 5 or 6, 59, 60 times. So that's pretty cool. that was intriguing when I was looking through. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'd forgotten about that because it was like 10 plus years ago. Now here's, again, I want to talk about, good stuff, not just bad stuff. We've met more times in the past 3 years than we had in the 7 years combined. So I think that's a good sign that, I'm happy to get the group going again, but we'll talk later about how there's still some challenges. And this is an interesting bit of trivia. And again, I don't know if you're going to be able to guess this, but we had 2 talks on the same day on the same topic with the same title by 2 different speakers offering their take on that topic. Same topic, same title, 2 different speakers. Anybody want to throw out a guess of what you think it might have been in 2011? Not saying that's necessarily a clue for many people, but it could be a bit of a clue. And again, we've got a lag, I think, because I'm not seeing anybody writing yet, but perhaps in a moment I'll see you chime in with a thought. And I'll just wait about 10 more seconds. Okay, so one guess was CF script. And it was not that close, but it was a car. So check it out. You might be surprised. Getting started with ColdFusion Builder 2. Getting started with ColdFusion Builder 2. Ray Camden and Josh Adams each did a talk on that topic. And I think at that time, Josh was working for Adobe. So that may be why he was doing it. And Ray also wanted to talk about it. So I just thought, again, when I was looking over the past, I just thought, hey, that was interesting to see. And just as a little for what it's worth, the 200th episode was, in fact, in 2011. So, we were really very much busier in those first 6 years than, it was 6 years, 3 years, 6 years, and then since then, 11 years. Yeah, so quite a difference. I just thought that was interesting. I don't want to hide anything. Someone could argue, well, that shows we were really busy back then. Yes, we were much more busier back then. But, it's not been dead since then. So anyway, moving on. Let's check out the top topics that have been presented. I'm sorry that the font's a little bit smaller. I was fighting trying to get this set up, and I ran out of some time. But anyway, the top, I just kind of assessed it based on looking at the topics and finding out how many seem to have similar topics. So this is not perfectly statistically accurate, but it was close enough. The top topic really has been security, and isn't that good to hear? So 14 of the episodes have been about security. And believe it or not, 13 of them have been about CF Builder. I meant to spell that out. But yeah, ColdFusion Builder. Now, let me just say this while we're here, people are listening. Some of you know ColdFusion Builder came out with CF 8, and I think like 2008. That's when it came out originally. And it was built on Eclipse, which was a Java IDE. And that's kind of hamstrung its popularity. A lot of people didn't care for the Eclipse look and feel. Some folks had used CF Eclipse and they thought, well, I don't even need CF Builder. I use CF Eclipse. But there were people that were, not using either, and they tended to still want to use Dreamweaver or HomeSite or CF Studio, or then Sublime came along and Notepad++ even for some people. Well, then now some of you know that in the years since, like in the past 3 or 4 or 5 years, VS Code, Visual Studio Code, the free Code editor and IDE from Microsoft, not to be confused with Visual Studio, VS Code. And you might think, come on, Charlie, nobody needs to be told this. Yeah, no, they do. They do. Some people do, because they're still using Dreamweaver and HomeSite Plus and ColdFusion Studio or Notepad++ or Sublime. People get stuck in their ways. You all know, who've been around a long time. You find an editor, you like to stay with that editor. Well, I just want to clarify, VS Code, Visual Studio Code, has really taken off in the past few to several years. So much so that almost every event you go to, every video you watch, people are using VS Code. And over the years, recently especially, while there have been some community contributed VS Code extensions for ColdFusion, and there's a couple of really popular ones, some people said, hey, Adobe, why don't you support that instead of stupid old Eclipse? And so finally, this year, they came out. If you haven't heard, this is important news. They came out with a VS Code extension for ColdFusion. And in your VS Code UI, you'll see it maybe showing up as Adobe CFML is the name, but it is formerly ColdFusion Builder. So yeah, there's now a ColdFusion Builder extension for VS Code, and it's free. Whereas ColdFusion Builder built on Eclipse cost money. Oh, you got a free license with CF. Now, VS Code's extension that Adobe is providing is free. It's not open source, sadly, but it is free. So if you're into VS Code and you didn't know about that, just go search ColdFusion in the extensions interface and you'll find it. And it offers substantially all the same capabilities that the old CF Builder did. And some of you might go, well, that doesn't excite me because I didn't use it. And others said, well, I looked at it and used it, but I never understood it. I could never get it to work. I couldn't get the debugger to work. I couldn't get whatever. Well, all those features are there in the new CF Builder for VS Code. And those capabilities are there. And there are some, for some people, just as challenging. So there's a lot of people who maybe looked at it initially and either said, well, it doesn't feel like it adds anything over the extensions I'm already using, or they tried to use some things and they couldn't get it to work, and they've been complaining to Adobe that this doesn't work and that doesn't work. And Adobe's going to work on some things, and there are some bugs. But I'm telling you, a lot of it is just that people need to understand how they have to connect the dots. You have to have a project. You have to have a server connected to the project. You have to be opening the code in the project for it to have some of those cool features that are available. So anyway, we're not going to make this a talk about that. In fact, I will say that there was a talk on it at CF Summit. There was a preview talk on it from Adobe at a webinar back at the Dev Week in the summer. And then next month, I'm not sure. I don't have the date. There's an upcoming talk on it. I wish I'd gotten that. Is that the one that Mark's going to do at the Hawaii CFUG? I'm sorry, I didn't look that up. I should have looked that up. But I believe Mark Takata, the current ColdFusion developer evangelist, is going to do a talk on CF Builder. And you should definitely look for that and attend it and watch it, or watch the videos of the Adobe ColdFusion Dev Week. And I have a blog post I put up on the Adobe ColdFusion portal that points to those videos. Or if you just go to the Adobe ColdFusion portal and go to their videos. And the portal, by the way, is just coldfusion.adobe.com. If you don't go to there, you should go there, because there's a lot of stuff. There's videos, there's blog posts, there's discussions, lots of cool stuff. So anyway, again, we're getting off track. I just wanted to say, CF Builder, some people might go, I can't believe there was that many talks and it still never took off. Well, part of it was helping people see how to use things that sometimes they just couldn't figure out, or they didn't see the talk, so they never learned how they could have done it. So anyway, moving on. The next most popular topic was testing, and that's good to see. Again, I think this is all encouraging. Security was the biggest topic. Testing was the next biggest topic, and testing of all kinds, unit testing, using various unit testing frameworks or not. There was some stuff on load testing. So anyway, a bunch of stuff on testing. And I'm going to show you in a moment how you can see them. If you didn't know, I mentioned it earlier, all the recordings are online. I'll show you the URL for that. But you can look over all these, and we'll talk about the value of maybe considering doing that. But anyway, the next most popular topic, I just grouped these together, things that were related to either database or SQL or NoSQL. And it wasn't all NoSQL, trust me. But it might have been like 5 of them or 4 of them were on NoSQL. But I just figured, all related to database. And mobile, there's been a lot of attempts over the years to get people to either use the mobile capabilities of ColdFusion or use other mobile capabilities. So Dan Wilson and TJ Van Tol in particular did talks on NativeScript a couple times. I think maybe 3 or 4 times. And then ORM. Again, there's been people who think ORM is awesome and you should learn about it. And I know a lot of people are like, I don't use ORM. I don't care. But anyway, there were multiple topics about ORM, object relational mapping, if you don't know what that is. And it's a feature built into ColdFusion. And some people are like, wait, what? ColdFusion has ORM? I thought it had to do CF query and CF stored proc for everything, or their script equivalents. No, you don't have to do those. That's what ORM is you stop doing your queries or stored procedure calls, and you give that to the ORM to do for you, and you just talk to things as if they're objects, and the ORM in the background talks to your database. But anyway, go watch one of those videos. There's been multiple ones on it. All right, so moving on. The next most popular topic was JavaScript. And again, I'm really glad to see, what these top ones have been, because the group has been encouraging people to, leverage things that, believe it or not, some people still don't know. I was talking to somebody just yesterday, and, like a lot of developers, they're just doing very basic, simplistic stuff, been doing it for years, and don't really leverage, even still to this day, Ajax or calls back to the server or JSON back and forth, or even UI elements that, are better than stuff you build by hand. A lot of people don't know about this stuff. So trust me, there are topics either that we have done that you might still find compelling, or that we have not yet done that some people would go, wait, seriously, people haven't heard about that topic? Yeah, people have not heard about that topic. I see it every day, because in my consulting, I work with people every day. I don't see a lot of their apps, and I don't see much of their code, because I'm usually helping with troubleshooting, migration, updating, stuff like that. So I don't do development anymore, but I don't help them. I help them some, but I'm just saying, trust me, I've seen plenty of stuff. There's a wide range of capabilities out there, some really advanced people and some really very basic people, and a wide swath in the middle. And a lot of those folks in the middle, they're often just keeping what's going afloat, and they're not necessarily even given the authority or opportunity to modernize stuff. And we've had talks on that. And I should have looked to see how many were literally the word modernize. I just thought of that. I didn't look for that. I know we've had a few, and there've been others at other events. So, modernizing for ColdFusion is definitely a topic that is of interest to a lot of people. And some of you might think, we did that a long time ago. Okay, great. Good for you. But there's plenty of people that are often still living in this old house. So anyway, moving on. APIs, again, great to see. Lots of talks on APIs. And on cloud, absolutely. Been multiple talks on cloud. And specifically AWS, which is not included in the cloud one. So the cloud ones were generic things about other things, either generally cloud, or I think one was about Google cloud. But anyway, the point is there have been, so effectively 13 talks related to cloud, if you include them both together. All right. And again, there's a little mistake there, which I fixed before we went on. And then, believe it or not, Flex. Yeah, and some of you are like, wait, what? Flex? What the heck is that? So Flex was an interesting, server-side generation of Flash technology, which was very compelling to some people in the late part of the 2000s and some into the early teens, but it went the way of the dodo bird. So yes, there were several talks on Flex. And Air. And Air was the Adobe integrated runtime, which was in the same vein. So there was a time when Flash and Flex and Air were being promoted by Adobe to be some interesting new ways to do stuff. And most of them fell by the wayside. Issues arose. Again, that's history. We're not going to focus on that, but we had such talks. Hey, we've had 3 talks on Git. That's good to see. Again, there's a lot of people that are still to this day not doing any version control, or if they're doing it, they're not necessarily using Git, or if they're using it in the most rudimentary way. So seriously, there's plenty of room for people to learn more about version control, Git, GitHub, and the like, and especially CI/CD and things like that. So again, future topics, great opportunities. Caching, great to see. We've had a few. I'd like to see more. I was encouraging the people often, hey, let's get some talks on caching, and or I should step up and do some. Again, we'll talk about that later. Command box, we've had multiple talks on command box, and we could have more. There have been other places where that's discussed, so maybe it hasn't been as compelling to do them here as well. Java, been a few talks on Java and on updating CF and or Java. And then I just thought framework-wise, I put them all together, so you see some were higher than the other numbers, but just in kind of general order. Framework 1, we had 5. CF Wheels, we had 5. Model Glue, we had 2. Mach 2, we had 2. Coldbox, we had 2. Fusebox, we had 1. Cold Spring, we had 4. And dependency injection, we had 2. So just thought that was interesting. And, you can look at this and go, well, that doesn't add up to 300. You're absolutely right. I mean, this might add up to 100. I didn't even look at it. We had a lot of other random one-off talks on all kinds of topics. So, there's plenty of topics that don't fit into this categorization. And some might have been more than one that I just couldn't perceive readily as I was looking at it. But again, trust me, there's been a lot of data to assess to come up with all this stuff. So let's move on. So I mentioned the recordings, and I just want to make sure you all know this. The recordings of every event, all 300, have been recorded. And the links to those recordings have been, for the past 10 years, at a domain I created called recordings.coldfusionmeetup.com. So the group is coldfusionmeetup.com, and the recordings are here. And when I say there's a link to the recordings, just a couple things I'm going to go on and talk about here. First of all, that page called recordings.coldfusionmeetup.com, that currently goes to a thing in meetup.com that is what they call a pages feature, kind of like GitHub has pages. Meetup.com had pages. Well, they've announced just recently they're going to stop that. So Meetup.com is an interesting animal, and they have a certain focus. For years, they treated us like a second-class citizen because we didn't really meet in real life, and they didn't want to really support online meetings or in the several years ago. But then COVID hit, and they've been forced to change, and so they've embraced online groups. Anyway, as they change, one of the things they're changing is some of their website and the features that they offer. So this pages feature, where I had been for years keeping track of the recordings, that's going to go away literally at the end of this month. So I've gathered up all that information, and I will point to it either one place or another. I haven't decided, but don't worry, there's going to be a place, and all of them will be tracked. So that's why I'm glad I created that URL. So you don't have to worry about where it is. That URL will get you to where it will be when that time comes. And I also want to point out, for those who didn't know, in the early years, originally, all the meetings, starting with Stephen, were on Adobe Connect. And when he passed it on to me, I too took on the Adobe Connect account for the group. And for the next, 10 years, we ran the meetings on Adobe Connect. And some of you know that in those early years, there were some warts to it, and it wasn't, great in some ways, but it was very serviceable. And Adobe was kind enough to let us record the meetings. And those recordings are on the Adobe Connect website and servers. And if you go to that recordings.coldfusion meetup, the first 10 years of recordings, that's what they point to, is that meetup.com place where they were stored. So again, I very much appreciate Adobe doing that, and even all the way back to the earliest ones. But there were some challenges, like I said, with that. You couldn't, it wasn't streaming. It was kind of a walled garden. And so in 2015, we moved to YouTube. At first, I just would literally make recordings of the recordings, which was a pain, trust me, downloading the recordings. And then I had to upload them to YouTube. That was no fun, but I knew that YouTube was, even in 2015, a place where people were going to be preferring to find video, even for our kind of video. And at first, YouTube didn't really care much for long videos, and there were some things early on. But anyway, since then, that's where we've done it. And then about 3 years ago, I started using this thing called StreamYard. And I just want to point that out and shout out to them, because it's a free service with a paid option, but our use is suitable for the free version. And it's the way I'm running the meeting right now. You don't see that part. It's the making the sausage that you don't see. But I have like a control panel in StreamYard where I or other presenters come in, and I can pick who goes on the screen, and I can choose what gets shared and all that stuff. And I can add video and add audio. And we don't do that sort of stuff for now. But anyway, so one of the pluses, though, is that StreamYard then just streams the video to YouTube. So that's why you guys are seeing it on YouTube. StreamYard is streaming it from this thing that I'm using of theirs into YouTube. And then YouTube records it, of course. And YouTube captures the chat, this live chat. And let me just say, in case you guys haven't noticed it, because it's not obvious on the YouTube site, but live chat is a separate button when you're looking at a video. So you may see there's no chat or no comments, as it were, comments below a video, and think, oh, nobody's talking about it. But if you click the button for live chat, you will see what's going on in the chat right now. So some people like, everybody knows that. No, they don't. Trust me, they do not. I encounter this stuff all the time. So anyway, that's where we are now on YouTube. And so I started changing the recordings to point to the YouTube videos, and they're there, and hopefully that's going to be there for a very long time. I don't think I mentioned this, so if I didn't, I thought I threw up a bullet point. Back to the Adobe Connect recordings, I'm pretty sure I do. Maybe it's coming up. There's a glitch. Those servers that have been holding our things for so many years, I've noticed a few of videos I've looked at, just a few that I've looked at, the recordings don't work. So that's a bummer, and there's nothing we can do about that. So some of them you might click on, they won't work. And I was working with Adobe to try to fix it a few months ago, and it feels like they've just run out of gas of opportunity to be able to fix it. And since they're very old, often they figure it's not a priority. So, and again, this has nothing to do with the ColdFusion team. This is the Adobe Connect team, who may not know ColdFusion from Adam. And we're just one of many user groups in the Adobe ColdFusion user group environment, universe. So anyway, I don't hold that against anybody. Again, I appreciate that they let us hold the ones that we do have there. That's awesome. So anyway, I wanted to say as well, so our meetings, I hope you find them valuable. The recordings, I hope you find them valuable. But I want to mention too that, especially for news, like I used to in the early days start the meetings with news, but I just decided that made the videos be dated and not evergreen, as they call it. So I stopped doing that because there were already other avenues for finding news. Well, I want to stress right now, to me, the most compelling one is, if you like podcasts, the Modernizer, that's not or, Modernize or Die, just a typo, Modernize or Die podcast from Ortus, run primarily, produced and run by Gavin Pickin, with co-hosts, often mostly Ortus people. But the point is, they cover everything that's going on in the CF world. The sessions sometimes go on for an hour plus, as they list all the events coming up, and both generic ones and CF specific ones, and then blog posts and videos and VS Code hints, tips, and tricks, and just jobs. So if you have not been following the Modernize or Die podcast, I can't stress enough, check that out. And if you just Google Modernize or Die, you'll find it. And then I want to point out, if you hadn't heard it, in the recent past few months, Pete Freitag has started a new version of he used to do a tiny newsletter, and he's changed technologies and stacks under that. But anyway, it's called CF Brief. So again, if you just Google ColdFusion CF Brief, you will find you can sign up for free for Pete's newsletter. And it's a textual, listing of events coming up, recent blog posts. And he even goes so far as to also highlight discussions in the Adobe ColdFusion community forums, the Lucy developer forums, and the Ortus community forums. So that's great. Definitely check that out. And back to the comments being thrown in about HomeSite and HomeSite Plus, if you remember that distinction. Yeah, I was a huge fan of that. Presented on it many times. In fact, I should have looked to see how many times did we have talks on HomeSite or CF Studio, because I'm sure there were a few. Because it too, while it was generally straightforward and very simple and fast, there were capabilities that it had that sometimes people didn't know. So I really enjoyed showing off those special capabilities and helping make people even be more productive. All right, now let's move on. YouTube statistics. So again, we moved to YouTube. So since we moved there in 2015, there have been 20,000 views and 3,500 hours of watching, with nearly 450 subscribers. And of course, you don't have to be a subscriber. So there's a lot of people that watch them and don't subscribe. So please sign up. Smash the like button, hit that subscribe, as they say. And I have not been getting into doing that stuff because it's just, that's people that are just doing a YouTube video, talking to people on YouTube, whereas this group has always been, an online user group as a presentation. So anyway, and thank you, Sean. So I thought this was interesting. YouTube at least did let me say that of those past 7 years, what have been the top 10 most viewed videos on YouTube. And I was thrilled to see mine was the most popular. I did this just recently. It was called Installing ColdFusion 2021 Choices, Challenges, and Solutions. I think I did that in 2021 or maybe early 2022. I think it was in mid 2021. Some of you may not know this, but CF 2021 came out in November of 2020. So I think it was a few months later that I decided to put together that talk. Anyway, it's had 1,900 views, or 10% of the views. And that's the statistic they offered. So I just copied it in and pasted it. And the number there is the meeting number, and it was 288. And then there was a quirk thing where for some reason I listed both, but whatever, moving on. Then that native script talk that Dan Wilson did was the next most popular, and that was number 244. So that was about 4 years ago that talk happened. And it's had 1,700 views and 9% of the total viewership. And then Gavin Picken, I'm not surprised to see this. Gavin's talk, people were often asking, where's the part 2? So he did a part 1 on APIs, and this 2 was about 3 years ago. And he had some issues that just kept him from never doing the part 2. But then he started doing some API talks in the last year. And again, thank you, Gavin, for stepping up and offering those. But anyway, that was also about 9% of the total views. And then David Byers did an interesting intro to CF for beginner developers and decision makers, which, I'm just going to say, some people would think, oh, we don't need that. Let's talk about the advanced stuff that nobody knows. No, there's a place for that. But there's also a place for something as fundamental as ColdFusion 101. I know some people think nobody uses ColdFusion anymore. Nobody's moving to ColdFusion. Nobody's developing new apps. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. There's your proof. You're wrong. Don't buy it. That's just a lie. People are saying it like it's a gospel truth. It's not. And not only do I know that from like this, but of course, Adobe points out how many new sales of ColdFusion they have. And some of you see in the community that there's people that ask questions that you've never seen before. Now, of course, some of that is just people that have been in their job, doing their job, not getting out into the community. But you can tell by some of the questions, there are still people coming newly to ColdFusion. Now, maybe some of them are people that are being hired into an organization where an old CF person had left. Okay, that's true in every technology. The person coming in to take over the technology needs to learn that technology. So they need to learn ColdFusion. And some of you know that, Luis had come out with his ColdFusion in 100 days, and that's been very popular. And there's the Learn CF in a Week that had kind of gotten stale and had not been updated for a few years. And now there's a group of people trying to revive that. So there's definitely interest in even fundamental talks. So I've been a strong believer that, there's no topic that wouldn't warrant being presented and that there would be an audience for. And then I did another one on migrating apps to ColdFusion 2021, and that was the 5th most popular talk, about 5% of the total views. So, just looking at this, sure, APIs, you could say that's an advanced topic, but this was an introduction to APIs. And then native script was a particular implementation of mobile that some people were interested in. And then people are moving to CF 2021. And some of you think nobody's doing that anymore. Everybody's moving to Lucy, or everybody's staying on ColdFusion 10 or 11. And no, trust me, I do this stuff every day. There's a very large audience of people that are still on CF 2020 or on CF. And again, that's not to at all knock anything. It's nothing about Lucy. I'm just saying, don't believe that people give the impression that nobody's doing ColdFusion anymore. That is just not true. Why would people be watching these videos? Why would they be in the top 2 of the top 5 videos? And that's 2021, for goodness sake. So, you may be sticking with something old, or you may be choosing to switch over to Lucy. And again, I'm not holding that against anybody. I help people in both places, but let this be a, interesting observation that there's plenty of people interested in 2021. Don't buy that nobody is. And then another thing about API. So Dan Wilson did a talk on the API manager. Well, there too, that's another thing that's built in for free. Uh-oh. Oh, good. I see somebody said Daniel lost audio. Others can still hear me. Good. Thank you for that. The API manager is built in for free with ColdFusion Enterprise since CF 2016. So if you aren't using it and have never thought about it, check out that video. So have a bunch of other people, 3% of the videos. And that's another topic about which some people would love to see more talks. And security, okay? Securing ColdFusion apps with Fixinator and FuseGuard. Pete did that, and I'm happy to have Pete do that sort of talk over and over. I think it could be quarterly, and there'd be an audience that would be just as strong every quarter. Because not everybody's watching every show, nobody's paying attention all the time, and there's some topics that everybody needs to hear. And I love Pete's tools, and I'm glad to help promote him whenever I can. And then Rakshith had done a walkthrough of what at the time was CF 2018, I believe. Stratus was 2018. and that was a very popular one. If anybody knows that I've got that wrong and that was CF 2021, cool. The next one, 2023, is project name Fortuna. And if you go to Wikipedia, you can find the code names for everyone. Neo was CF6. You know, some of you see stuff in ColdFusion files referring to Neo. That was the name of ColdFusion 6 when they converted everything from running on C++ to running on Java. That's where Neo came in, and some of those files have never had their names changed. But anyway, and then again, API stuff. Look, top 3 of the top 10 things have been API related. So there's definitely an audience for API stuff. This was Adam Tuttle on his Taffy framework and some more related stuff. So check that out if you haven't seen it. And then there's Brad talking about Command Box, and that was also one of the top 10 most popular presentations. I remember when Dan did a talk and it didn't share a screen, but we could hear him. He did half the presentation before we finally got through to him. Yeah, and I was on with you at that time, and we just couldn't get Dan's attention. I'd like send him texts and direct messages, and he was just focused. Good for him. He was focused on the show. But yeah, he didn't have anything being shared. It's good stuff still. You can probably find that one. I don't remember what it was, but he's done, I think it was about several things, so you could find it. Anyway, moving on. And I want to point out, and by the way, somebody on the Modernize or Die show just this past week was making the comment that even old episodes of ours would still be relevant. They were looking through the list of topics, and they said that would still be relevant. And I just thought, let's take a quick look. Let me open a new window up here, and I'm going to go to recordings.coldfusionmeetup.com. Now, see, that's a bummer. Sometime in the recent past, they made you have to log in. They didn't used to. And maybe that's part of why they went away from the pages, because maybe people were abusing them. So they added this front door, and then people said, hey, you put the front door on my pages. They were supposed to be public. So they just probably are saying, you know what, we're just getting rid of pages. Go find somewhere else to put them. So I'm going to do that. I will find somewhere else to put it. But anyway, so this is it. If you've never seen it before, this is the front door of recordings.coldfusionmeetup.com. It redirects to this page. And I was just keeping track of this. And you can see I kept track each year of how many sessions there were. And the pages wouldn't let them be very big. So some years when we had lots of sessions, I couldn't fit them all on one page. So I had to split them, if you ever wondered why that was so. But anyway, so here we see the years and years and years. And I'm just going to go back to 2017, for example, just to pick that as a random thing. Well, look at that. Protecting your apps with FuseGuard. It was FuseGuard 3, but that'd still be compelling to watch. And then there's Rakshith talking about, at the time, that would have been CF 2018. So busting ColdFusion myths was a heads up of what was coming with CF 2018. And then CF in the Cloud, Pete Lombardo. And that was just in 2017. And I'll go ahead and go back and look at 2016. There were 5 sessions that year. And there's Giancarlo talking about WebSockets, which he still does to this day. And that's another one of those topics. I think he's done it more than once. I think it was only twice, so it didn't show up on the list of the top topics. But anyway, that would be just as compelling now. Some people, I was just talking to somebody a week and a half ago who had a problem for which WebSockets seemed like it would be a good solution. They're like, what's WebSockets? And I didn't know ColdFusion did that. So, I point people to these videos all the time. Load testing. Sure, load testing. That was with a particular tool. I forget if that was Octoperf. I think that's Octoperf. I'm sorry to him if I got that wrong. I remember I had to work on this Orléans Delucier, I think as well. But that was 6 years ago. It's in my brain. Right or wrong. Anyway, there's Pat Quinn talking about CFusion back then. And CFusion, I don't think it's changed much since Fusion. I think it's still CFusion 5 because it's solid enough. It serves people. So anyway, you could watch that talk and still get value. And look, there's Brad Wood's talk on what's a pull request, contributing to open source. Perfectly evergreen topic, never going to go stale. And then there again was NativeScript being talked about, which was a particular platform for mobile, but sometimes you'll still get value looking at that. Well, anyway, that's just 2 random years I picked from 5 and 6 years ago. And I just want to say, yeah, absolutely. There's some old topics that are just as compelling now as back then. All right, now let's wrap up. We only got 10 minutes left. I wanted to talk about our speakers. So the top 15 most frequent speakers, you probably won't be surprised to see this me, but I want to point out I've only done 25 of the 300 shows, only 25. Again, I never wanted to make it the Charlie show, so I did these talks when I thought it was appropriate, or I did some when there wasn't anybody else presenting. But, I didn't, this has not been the Charlie show. Dan Wilson, I forgot I hadn't yet shown you guys this. So Dan Wilson was the next most frequent speaker. He did 10. Ray Camden did 9. Again, some of you may not be surprised. Brad Wood, 7. No surprise there. Steve Drucker, who was the CEO of Figly Software, and I got into doing a lot of this stuff based on stuff I learned from the DC ColdFusion user group that he and Dave Watts and others there ran. Among my earliest presentations were there. And then I went to work there back in 99, 2000. So anyway, some of you may not know Steve, but man, he would do some melt your brain presentations, see what you could do with ColdFusion, especially JavaScript. So those are fun to actually watch. And there's Gavin Picken. Thanks again, Gavin, for stepping up, doing those. And then Dave Ferguson, who often is talking about database stuff, even at the conferences. He's done several of those for us. And Mike Hinkey is an old name that some of you remember. He had done a few. And there's Pete, again, doing his security talks as always. And then Peter Bell, some of you remember him, active in the community. He's moved on to doing much more broad stuff, supporting CTOs in general. But he had done a few talks. Mark Mandel, who was behind frameworks like Java Loader and some other things. He had done some talks back then. Mark Phillips did talks. Terry Ryan did talks. Bill Sheldon did talks. And Bob Silverberg. So those are the top 15. And some of you will recognize some of those names. And Terry just popped up at the ColdFusion Summit doing a talk earlier this month. So a lot of people still around. So that's good to see. And then here's all of the presenters. I just wanted to put this up here. It'll be captured for posterity in the recording here. Here's all the past presenters. This first page is those that had done 2 or more talks. So the first 2 columns are mostly what I just showed you. And then there's more. And I don't know why. I guess I shouldn't have started going into the Bill Shelton, Bob Silverberg stuff because, yeah, there's other people that did 3. I guess I should have just done stopping at the 4. But anyway, moving on, you can see several people did 3, several people did 2, and this page is all of those. And now you can see how it adds up to 300. Lots of different people. Well, goodness gracious, then there's 2 pages of people that just did 1. And again, I appreciate the people that came and just did 1 talk. And some of them are there maybe as an and I should have added them to the other. But anyway, moving on, minor issue. But it's great to see, again, thanks to everybody that was there and that participated and gave a talk. Very, very nice. There's Sean. Sean piped up earlier. And I think, Jim, you were in that list too. Did you give a talk? I don't see one. Maybe. Again, it's not in alphabetical order by name. So I think I saw Jim Harris, which made me think of that. Oh, there's Jim. Yep, Jim. Thank you, Jim. And I think that covers people who have chatted so far. But again, if I missed you in the chat, again, thank you very much for everybody who's been on to be a presenter. All right, so that's all the good news. Let's talk about some of the bad news. Yes, Jim, you did too, right? I indicated that. So you maybe hadn't seen that by the time I found that. So thank you again for your participation, for your service. So there have been challenges along the way. The biggest challenge has been finding speakers. I mean, those years where I wouldn't have anybody is because I couldn't get anybody. It's like pushing rope. I'd open the door. I would do blog posts. Yep, there you go. And that looks like there's a lag. So I see Sean popping up now. So it's like a minute lag, I guess. But anyway, so sorry about that with the earlier questions. Finding speakers has been a real challenge. And there have been years where, like I said, I couldn't get anybody. And it's like pushing rope. And I do all I can to get their attention. I used to even send announcements to the speaker list because I've presented at pretty much every conference. And if I'm not presenting, I'm at least on the list or know about it. And I would often, some of you were speakers know that I would have in the years past say, hey, if you guys would like to give your talk, we'd love to have it. It's a chance for you to repeat the talk, maybe fix something you made a mistake or improve it in a way that you didn't think of while you were giving the talk until afterwards. You said, oh, I could have done this. Hey, we can capture it and record it. I would think that every presenter would want to have that opportunity, but trust me, it's like crickets. Nobody would ever follow up. So, Edges is what it is. I don't quite understand it. And Adobe's only had 1 speaker. And if I can include Josh, then 2. But at the time I was thinking it was just Rack Sheath who gave those couple of talks. And I said once, but now I realize he did do twice. But anyway, I would have thought Adobe would have given us lots of talks. Now, one thing I'll say is that in recent years, they've started to do their own webinars. So it's understandable that now that they do their own webinars, they don't need to use the Meetup. But in the early years, I just was always surprised, why can't we get an engineer to come on and talk about a particular feature? And I'm not bashing it. Who knows what was responsible, who was involved, what the teams were like back then. I'm just saying that always surprised me that I couldn't get more speakers at all, let alone from particularly Adobe. And then I want to just tell you, making the meeting, man, you guys don't realize there's a lot of work. There's so much work in getting this stuff started and organizing the speakers and following up and creating the StreamYard and sending them the URL for the video and then creating the presentation slides that are going to be shown on the meetup.com site. It's, I don't say this much publicly, so I don't want to whine about it now, but I'm just saying there's a fair bit of work. And so sometimes it's been nice to not have to do that. And then there's also the cost. And thank you very much, Daniel, for your comment just there. The Meetup site itself costs nearly $200 a year, and I just bear that myself, and I'm happy to do it. It's not that much, but it is a couple $100. What annoys me is that when there's those little glitches about things, or when they don't give this, something that I think is a fundamental thing, I'm bummed that it's a hassle like that. But anyway, moving on. For now, I'm keeping it at meetup.com. There's some value to that. So finally, wrapping up, what's the new direction that I have in mind? Well, I'm thinking I'm just going to go ahead and let it be the Charlie Show. Not changing the name, but in concept. I'm not going to wait for other speakers. I'm just going to go ahead and start all those talks I kept mentioning. And there's plenty that I didn't mention. There's things just in the last 2 weeks. There's things where I go, man, I'd like to do a talk on that. Now, some of you might say, well, why don't you just create a YouTube channel? Well, that's what this is, right? This is a YouTube channel. And it actually is technically my YouTube channel because in the early days, there was no way to do it any other way. So this is my YouTube channel that you're looking at. And I just have StreamYard send the videos to that. And I've labeled the talks as, the videos that show up have been my, on my channel saying that they're the CF Meetup shows. And I'm cool with that. I'm just saying I want to do more of them. And so I plan to do them. And I want to commit, but I can't promise. But my plan, I've done this before. I've talked this often in other ways. I used to run a user group. I've run multiple CF user groups in different places. I've presented at them. If you go to my website and see my presentations, you'll see I've done hundreds of talks. So I don't have a problem coming up with talks and presenting them often. So I hope to start doing at least monthly and maybe even hopefully bi-weekly or even weekly. We'll just see how it goes. And another thing is I'll still welcome other speakers, but I'm not going to make it the focus because it just feels like it's pushing rope. Okay, let's move on. I'll just start offering talks. And I'm going to probably just switch to a half hour as a default instead of an hour because, where'd the hour come from? I think that came from the days when we would meet at user groups and you wouldn't want to have to all drive into wherever the place was and do the meeting and only get a half hour talk out of it. Well, now it's all online. So why does it need to be an hour? I think there's some people that maybe don't even want to give a whole hour or they don't think the topic is of interest for a whole hour. And who knows, I might even have some days where I'll do a half hour for one thing and half hour for another, or start doing one in the morning or one at the noon Eastern time and one at the evening, 6 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll see how that shakes out. But I'm just saying, I want to shake it up a little bit and I want to do some better promotion. I have not gone onto the CFML Slack or the Facebook or LinkedIn groups and announced the meetings because I just kind of felt like some people would not like that. Well, I've noticed other people popping in and doing that. So thank you for those who did do that, but I think I'll start doing it and we'll see how it goes. If anybody complains, I'll back off. But I just do think there's an audience of people that aren't seeing the Meetup announcements, aren't seeing my posts on the portal, aren't seeing my tweets, and they would see these. And, I just want to help bring people to available topics, however we get them. And David piped in live coding with Charlie, but again, it won't be coding. And that's where there have been, like Mark Takata did that for a while. And I know Gavin Picken has done some things like that, and Orders might do more things like that. And again, that's cool. But yeah, my stuff would never really be per se coding. It'll be, topics, features, concepts, capabilities. So you could call it pimping myself if you want to, but I don't want to call it that. So there you go. That's what we already do. Again, if you don't know about it, the portal is at coldfusion.adobe.com, and I announce the meetings there. But if you're not paying attention, it's like a tree falling in the forest to you. So I want to find your forest wherever you are and get word out. So that's that, man, right on the money. That's all I wanted to cover. Thank you for everybody who's thrown in some chats along the way. As you saw, this was mostly us looking back over where the group has been and gone and how it's been, in good ways and some ways that are not so good, and then where I want to go in the future. So, I look forward to feedback, whether you share it now or in tweet. The CF Meetup, if you didn't know, the Twitter account is just CF Meetup. Simple as that, CF Meetup. And I look forward to any feedback anybody has to this or anything else we're doing. And again, if you want to talk, I didn't mention it because I'm going to stop pushing it, but there's always been speak.coldfusionmeetup.com. And that took you to a blog post I did on, hey, love to have you as a speaker. Here's when we happen. Here's how it works. Here's what topics are welcome. How about reprising a talk you gave at a talk at a conference? Just crickets. So I'm going to just focus on getting the content out there. And so, yeah, to a degree, it's kind of like just any video guy on YouTube now who does a weekly thing. Brett Fisher does his awesome thing about Docker every week, for example. And then there's other people that just push content all the time. And I'm still torn. I kind of want to make it be a show, a live thing like this, where you guys have the chance to ask questions and share feedback. So it'll be that. And I might over time transition to something still different, but that's the plan for now. So again, thanks everybody for your feedback there that you're throwing in. Again, thanks everybody that's been participating all along, whether as a speaker or just as an attendee. We're here for you. That's what the group's for. And I think we're just down to people offering thank you. So again, I'll say thanks to everybody, and I'll wrap it up now. And actually, before I go, one more thing. I was torn about making also the group more interactive, like letting you have the opportunity to talk or share your screen. That can be challenging, and so I've always stayed away from it. But I'm going to explore some of those possibilities. Maybe allocate a show and let's see how it goes. Or if it goes well, then maybe allocate a portion of each show. Maybe even the second half hour could be that. We'll see. I'm open to ideas. I want to make it be what people want it to be, and yet it's got to still work well and not be something that most people don't want to see. So we'll find the right pattern, but I'm just going to shake it up in the sense of I'm just going to start creating content. I'm ready to go. I've got stuff ready to go. I've been wanting to get this 300 show so I could start going to 301 and beyond with these other topics. So look for that news soon. And I don't see any further comments, so I'll go ahead and wrap it up. Until the next time, everybody. Got to learn a good thing to end with. I'll get some closing music or something like that. For now, it's just focus on the content. Content's king. I'll make it pretty later. So we'll see about that. Talk to y'all later. Bye.